Hi, welcome to ROI for Sales Training, implementing Kirkpatrick. So let's be honest, most sales training gets judged on whether people like it and maybe if they pass the quiz. But the people in charge that are paying for the training, they only care about if the needle was moved in the business. That's where the Kirkpatrick model comes in because it's not about some dusty academic theory. It's simply 4 steps for you to connect your training to real sales results. It gives you a clear chain from we ran a workshop to we closed more deals faster. If you use it right, you can prove exactly how your programs improved win rates, shortened ramp time, increased deal size, or reduced costly mistakes. And that's the language your CRO, CFO, and CEO speak. Bottom line, Kirkpatrick helps you build training that doesn't just feel good, it pays off. It's your playbook for showing that sales enablement is not a cost center, but a revenue driver. Okay, so here are the 4 levels of Kirkpatrick. So we start with level 4 and we work backwards to level 1. Level 4 basically is what the company exists to do. So if it's a for-profit company, it exists to make money. So that is the level 4 result that you are looking for. Now, it might take a long time to get to that result. So we would leverage leading indicators to see if we're headed in the right direction. Level 3 is the employee behavior. So if you have an issue in the company, identify critical behaviors that you know will result in the leading indicator that you're looking for, right? And then you support these critical behaviors with required drivers. So you monitor the critical behaviors, you reinforce the critical behaviors, you encourage the critical behaviors, and you reward the critical behaviors. Level 2 is the knowledge, it's learning. So why aren't they doing the critical behavior? Depending on what the reason is, that's how you design the training, right? So for example, if there's a lack of knowledge, then that means you have to take a certain approach. If they have knowledge but they don't have a skill, then that might require a slightly different approach. If it's an attitude issue, again, that could be a unique approach. So depending on why they aren't doing the critical behaviors, that will tell you how to design that training. And then level 1 is how they feel, how the learners feel about the training. Are they engaged? Do they find it relevant? Are they satisfied by it? So that is Kirkpatrick in a nutshell. Okay, now let's look at level 4 and go a little deeper. So we said level 4 again was what? It is what the company exists to do, their ultimate goal. So if it's a for-profit company, they exist to make money. So, and then we said that it might take too long to see if we're impacting that ultimate goal. So instead, we look at leading indicators that will show us if we're headed in the right direction. So how does Kirkpatrick define these leading indicators? They say that short-term observations and measurements suggesting that critical behaviors are on track to create a positive impact on the organizational mission statement. Okay? So again, you're having an indication that you're headed in the right direction. And then they split up these leading indicators into 2 types: internal leading indicators and external leading indicators. An example of an internal leading indicator would be your overhead cost. So that's something that you can control internally. So that's why it belongs in that first category. An example of external would be sales volume, new customers, customer ratings, repeat sales. These are all examples of external leading indicators. Okay, now looking at level 3, we briefly spoke about critical behaviors. So let's look at the definition of critical behaviors. The few key behaviors that the primary group will have to perform on the job to bring about the targeted outcomes. So, what do people need to do in order to get us towards those leading indicators that we're looking for? Okay. So, it's very important that these need to be specific, measurable, and observable. Okay, basically, the way I describe it is the clipboard test. Can someone stand over a clipboard and check it off and say that they've seen you do it? So, what's an example of a bad critical behavior? Was something that's not is not written well. An example would be manage direct reports effectively. That's very vague. That's not written well. What does that mean? What does effective mean? What does manage mean? A good way to write this would be conduct weekly team meetings that require all direct reports to document project status and required actions. This is very specific, and you can see easily if this was done or not done. Now, what are some other examples of critical behaviors? In SaaS, an example could be running discovery calls that meet the problem mapping rubric. So, do they meet the rubric or not? Something can be observed. In medical device, you could have delivering the full compliant value message in every HCP interaction. So, again, that's something that can be observed. In manufacturing, you could have including a client-specific ROI calculation in every proposal. Again, that's something that you can see if it was done. Now, we have required drivers. So what are these? These support and hold accountable the learners, right? By reinforcing them, monitoring them, encouraging them, and rewarding the performance of the critical behaviors on the job. So, what's an example of reinforce? An example of reinforce could be having a job aid, right? So, if you had a instructor-led training or an e-learning, and now they're being reinforced by a job aid, how could you encourage them? Coaching is a simple example of encouraging. Reward, pay for performance. That could be an example of reward. And then accountability, dashboards and work reviews. So again, Kirkpatrick emphasizes that you cannot do one-off training and then hope and pray that things will change. You have to support these critical behaviors with these required drivers to ensure that change in behavior. Okay, looking at level 2 and actually level 1. So level 2 is what they are learning or need to learn. And as we said, that depending on the reason why they don't do the critical behavior, that will tell us how to design the training intervention. So as an example, if they lack knowledge, imagine they're selling a product and they lack product knowledge. So yes, so that's something you might need to emphasize some memorization of specific content. But say that they know the um, the product knowledge really well, they know the sales methodology really well, but they can't put it into practice when they're in front of another human being. So that could be a skill issue, and you wouldn't approach that the same way as you would the former. So this might require a lot of role playing, a lot of simulations to help them practice exactly what they'll be doing on the job. Now, level 1 is keeping the training intervention engaging keeping it relevant because adults want to spend their time wisely and they want what they're learning to be relevant, and that they find it satisfying. And that wraps up our 4 levels of Kirkpatrick.